I really love and appreciate the audience that's built up around me. We've done this dance over years about what they want and expect and what I can deliver on. So it's very special to me, that audience, because of what we get to do together.
Hello, and welcome to the Dragon Tree Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Hobson, and today we have a gentleman by the name of Oz du Soleil joining us. Oz is a Microsoft Excel MVP, which we'll find out more about what that is in a minute. He runs the YouTube channel Excel on Fire and has developed several courses through LinkedIn Learning, primarily covering Microsoft Excel. In addition, he is the lead author of a book called Guerrilla Data Analysis Using Microsoft Excel. Oz, with that introduction, please let me know if I missed anything and we can get started.
Thanks a lot. I'm glad to be here. And just one thing is,
Yeah.
when you mentioned the books and you mentioned me as a lead author, I was a lead author on Guerrilla Data Analysis Edition 2. I
Oh,
wrote about, I'd say, 85 to 90% of that. But with the third edition,
look at that.
this book is more like 50-50.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
co-author is probably better way of putting it.
For edition 3.
Okay, for our
Yep.
purposes, gotcha. Well, like I said, today we'll be talking about communication, and I just want to set the stage for folks in the audience who may not be familiar with your work. I actually found you through a LinkedIn learning class called Excel Managing and Analyzing Data, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I'm interested in your background in data analysis in general and Excel in particular. How did you get to this point?
Well, briefly, I started in a call center,
Hmm.
and my higher ups had all this data about my poor performance, answering too few calls. My calls were too long, and it just got me angry because I felt like I was working harder than a lot of other people in the call center, and they're busting my chops constantly.
Hmm.
So I decided, okay, they've got data, let me get some data. And so I decided I'm going to track every call and everything I do for a week.
Ah.
And then I can start to see patterns, and categories started to come up. And so I just had this instinct to start grouping things together and getting counts and times. And it was interesting to me. And so I was at a point where I was so angry and just, I figured I'm going to send this to the president of the company,
Hmm.
skip over my supervisor, the director, the vice president, just go straight to the doggone president. And he got back to me and wanted to talk with me. And there's a lot of stuff that I had that nobody knew. They didn't know how many tech support calls we were taking. They didn't know how many people were calling and asking a whole bunch of questions and then saying, okay, thank you. Let me think about it. I might call back later. I had all of that in that week of data. And so I believe it was impetus for the decision to outsource tech support,
Hmm.
because everybody above thought that every call was, here, sign me up for a course and take my money. Hey, send me some books and take my money. Nope.
Hmm.
Very few of the actual calls were that. Um, so when I saw the seriousness that this was taken with and that I didn't get in trouble, people were frustrated. They didn't like that I had gone straight to the president of the company, the people in between. Um, that was a message to me as well. That, man, when I've got data on my side, I've got some power.
Hmm.
I'm not invincible, but wow, I was taken aback by that. And that just showed me, huh, this data thing and this Excel thing, there's something going on here.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. And so we got a new director eventually, and he saw that I had a skill, and he started moving me around to, or giving me different projects that were data driven. We had stuff around, you know, special people who understood products. And if you got too deep with a product and you couldn't answer it, you forward the call to these people. We had that. But as far as like the data and things being messed up, why didn't my continuing education get reported to the state? Why did you send us this certificate again, but you didn't send this other person's certificate? And I could see there was problems with the data and not understanding products. And so I started to see things like, and this person has 6 profiles in the system. That's why everything is all messed up.
And the name's spelled differently every time, probably, right?
Either spelled differently, or there's a middle initial on this one and no
Ah,
middle initial on this
of
one,
course.
or they changed companies.
Oh.
And so now here's their Charles Schwab account, and
Mhm.
now here's their Edward Jones account. And now that created some kind of a problem.
Wow.
So, first of all, Excel MVPs, we tended to be doing something else, right? And then there was something wrong with the data, our processes, or something. And there wasn't anybody around who could fix it,
Hmm.
or fix it in the time that we needed. And so we decided, okay, I guess it's got to be me. Um, but then when you mention data scientists, now I don't know how data scientists started, but that sounds to me like you need some formal training.
Hmm.
Database people tend to be formally trained. That's their job. You can look up jobs for uh, database, but there are no jobs that say we need an Excel expert. No, we need um, a logistics person who's heavy with Excel.
Hmm. Of
And
course.
so a lot of I have described Excel users as rogues
Rogues.
because we did start off doing something
Interesting.
else,
Hmm.
and then our work in Excel just eclipsed everything else. I get asked, how can I get a job like yours? When I was doing full-time freelancing. Well, you aren't going to look for a job that says just Excel.
Right.
Um, I had the good fortune to have somebody throw a lot of projects at me while I was in customer service. And then I wound up being a commissions analyst, and that was Excel all day, every day. And then being I don't know, a subject matter expert, I guess I could be called. But I was supporting specific clients, and a lot of that support involved messing around with the data. And what do I mean? A lot of their problems were tied to data. One time I found a bunch of people's IDs were all scrambled up.
Hmm.
Because we had maybe 100 people, and all of the IDs were there, but somehow I'm guessing through some bad copy paste job, I wound up with your ID. You had Joan's ID, and Joan had Marvin's ID. And so there was a whole lot of back and forth I had to do with the client to get that unscrambled. And I liked that kind of stuff. So then there was a layoff in '08, and I continued on with Excel projects,
So interesting.
and that helped a lot. That exposed me to more Excel. This insurance agent needs this about Excel, and this marketing
Hmm.
company needs this, and the chef needs this other thing. I worked with some people who did ground sampling. That was fascinating. And so there are a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. And I loved it because it did broaden what I needed from this tool we call Excel.
Yeah, and what I love about that story is it's just so reminiscent of your class. And I
Mm,
intend to take more of your classes, but the one I'll link to in the show notes, what you do such a good job of, and I think this plays into the your ability as a communicator and a teacher, is you actually provide context for a lot of the exercises. So it's just I've taken a lot of LinkedIn learning classes, and I'm sure a lot of other are this way too. But you provide exercise files alongside how you demonstrate to use different parts of whether it's Power Query or other like pivot tables or other aspects of Excel. But you actually take it that next level and you do what you just did so well, which is you paint a picture. Like, why are we doing this? You don't just say, here's some names. Here's another table over here. We're going to combine these two tables in one place. You really seem to be speaking from experience in your videos, and whether
mhm.
that's on YouTube or LinkedIn. So I'm just grateful that you gave me that opportunity to try to reel some people in and get them in your class because I just think it's so valuable. Um,
Wow,
oh,
thanks. Thanks.
absolutely.
Well, and I'll say briefly is I don't think so much of myself as a communicator. I do think of myself as a teacher, and I pay attention to what's going on out in the real world.
Mm,
And I will look at some, some Excel tutorials, and I'll see, oh, here's another retail example. Here's another, budget example. Whereas, what have I dealt with in real life? Well, people who needed something to help them map out deliveries, something for detecting low levels of inventory. Who are our largest donors and donors that we haven't heard from in 3 or more years? Okay, how do we define or calculate large donor?
right,
Okay, they've donated at least $500. Okay, $500 in one payment or several payments added together.
right.
Yeah, and so it was important to me to show all of that as a way to show that Excel does more than budgeting and
Mm,
uh and retail stuff.
yep.
It's not all finance. There's so many things. I helped a law firm build a survey form.
Mm, in Excel.
So yes,
Interesting.
yes.
Well, see there, right there. I didn't know you could do that. So you learn something new every day. Yeah, so I'd actually like to understand Oz a little bit more about, I guess how you define effective communication, and maybe a little bit about your. We've talked a bit about your background, but maybe even going back so far as when you were a kid. Did you enjoy puzzles? And I guess when were you first draw? You talked a little bit again about being in the call center, but I wonder if anything predates that. Even maybe when you were younger, if you enjoyed analytical things like puzzles or mathematics or anything like that.
Um, so yeah, you're talking about communication, data, puzzles. Um, I don't like crossword puzzles.
Mm,
I generally don't like games. I like things that are real in some sense. But Jumble, I did love Jumble, and I
oh.
would try to see if I could do them without writing them down and seeing, moving and saying, okay, there's a T and an H here. And then they would have maybe four scrambled words, and some are circled, and the circled ones go to the fifth question that would be possibly a longer statement. And so those would even be jumbled. So those were fun to me, this kind of moving things around in my head versus knowing a whole bunch of random stuff about the world.
Oh, very practical.
Well, it wound up being practical for me because a lot of what I have done over the years is look for patterns. Um, like I got a whole bunch of data that's just all over the place because I copied it off of a web page and pasted it in and it pasted funny. Now I need to get the, say, zip code. Oh man, now the zip code. Some don't have zip codes, and some the zip code is here, and the other places are here because of some missing information in that record. So, what pattern can I see so that I can write one formula and zoop, bring it down, and extract all of the zip codes? Um, there's so much of that, and so much, writing formulas is understanding the data so that then I can recognize the patterns and get going. Um, that helped a lot. And as a kid, I was very curious. My pet snake died, and I melted some wax and put it in a sheet pan, and I got the pins and I dissected my
Oh,
pet snake,
oh my gosh.
see what was inside it.
Sure.
Um, my mother got the World Book Encyclopedia set, and there were times where I'd say, "Okay, let me get the G book and just go through and see, all different kinds of
It sounds
goats."
like we had the same
Uh,
encyclopedias. Did yours have the little transparent pages for, like, the human body and
yep,
yeah, I
yep,
wonder if we had the same ones.
yep, yep,
Yeah.
yep. There's those transparent layers, and there
Yep,
was a
yep.
frog and stuff.
Yeah.
Yep,
Oh, I think you're right.
yep.
Yeah, yeah, so
But
and
I would entertain myself with that because I grew up, we grew up in a time where, at least in my household, we had one television and it was downstairs. There was no cell phone.
you had
I
to
could
dial the
go
stations, right?
dial the stations and move the antennas. Yep.
Yep.
But I could go to my bedroom and listen to music, um, read the encyclopedia. So I did that, and it just opened up a fascination for me.
Mm,
It didn't leave me. I didn't ingest it in such a way to where I could do a bunch of crossword puzzles. It just opened up my fascination to where I wanted to go places and see
mm.
things and hear foreign languages and taste different foods.
And just see how the
And
world works maybe. Maybe that's part of data analysis is just getting the story behind the story, like, what's actually going on. Is that do you think that plays into that?
now, now that gets into a whole different thing because okay, so let me briefly address this. Data is a very poor representation of reality.
Oh,
And
interesting.
that's where I get frustrated with this push toward data-driven decision making.
Oh.
Because morale doesn't show up in data. So the company's actual metrics are okay, but people are miserable.
Mm.
And when you're looking at the performance metrics, what about the misery? Do you include the churn metric in, say, all right, yeah, you're constantly answering more calls and your calls are shorter and you're bringing in more money? Um, what about a churn rate?
Oh, right.
How many people are getting fired? Why are they getting fired? Why are they quitting? Um, you say so many people aren't using this one feature. Let's get rid of it. But what about the few who use it and it is key to their whole existence.
Yeah, that wouldn't show up, would it?
Right, right. No, it's looking at, and then you wind up with this concept I think of as tyranny of the majority.
And I also want to talk about your YouTube channel, Excel on Fire. I'm a devoted fan of that as well. And what I really like,
Thanks.
and again, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. And what I like so much about it is you bring in world-renowned experts on Excel and data analysis in general. And what you do is you give them a problem. And I've seen you do this not just on YouTube, but you do it on LinkedIn, and you have a lot of fun challenges you put out there. But I've always been drawn to the YouTube channel because you do get these big names in the world of Excel, and it's so. And you come out and just say, I just really want to see how your mind works. It doesn't seem like you prepare them in advance. You just kind of drop a problem on them, which is usually very complex from my perspective, and you just want to see in real time how they work through it. And it's really speaks to your curiosity. I think you're actually constantly learning from it too, just like along with your audience. And I just wanted to see if that's the intention, and if you could just kind of talk about your YouTube channel, because I know it's not just about the challenges. You also give updates on things like joins. Like I was looking at one the other day where you talk about the expansion of joins in Excel. So could you talk a little bit about your YouTube channel and your approach on that platform too?
So, um, my YouTube channel, Excel on Fire,
Yes.
uh, it's evolved. Okay, the earliest ones were straightforward and dry, and I was not having any fun.
Oh, really?
And I have heard so many times when I would go out and teach, they would thank me for what I brought to the live classroom, and then say, other training is so boring.
Right, right,
So that was a permission that I got to go ahead and have fun myself. And I realized in order for the channel to be sustainable for me to constantly create, I got to have fun too. And I know that my style isn't for everybody. Some people do want just straightforward, show me this X lookup and leave me alone.
right.
They
Yeah,
don't need all the
exactly.
theatrics that I do. But, and I've had people complain, in the comment sections. But if I'm going to do it, I got to have fun. And so I really love and appreciate the audience that's built up around me. We've done this dance over years about what they want and expect and what I can deliver on. So it's very special to me, that audience, because of what we get to do together. And if I did have 1 million subscribers, great. I would love that. But I'm not chasing it. But then you asked me about the Excel Experts Live Challenge. That again came from me being a teacher. Um, there is so much that we go through when we're planning something, when we're building something, when we're studying a new formula, a new feature in Excel, or when we're coming up with a solution. It's not this straightforward path that you get in a 7-minute tutorial. You don't get to see the hours over several weeks of me trying to figure out, oh, how am I going to do this?
Mm,
You know, trying something and seeing that I'm near the end, and then there's something that comes in. And, oh man, now I got to start all over again. I got to back up. I wanted to show that as best I could. Um, Also, we don't get to see other people's processes. With whether I've been video editing or when I played bass, we don't see other people's path to what we finally see. I wanted to get into that. And the challenges are deliberately not too hard. Something that the people who come on can solve within a reasonable amount of time. The main thing is to show getting to a dead end and turning
Right.
around.
Yeah, that's what
What
always is.
am I thinking? Yep, yep.
And watching them
Am I
just be cool
thinking?
about it.
Yes, yes,
Like, not
being
freaking
cool
out.
about it,
Yeah.
right? Not freaking out, but then having a couple of people say, "Dawg, I know I can do this. I know I can do this," and they push and they push and they push. Um, we all do that, and so through this series, I wanted to show that we are all human.
So before we go any further, can we talk a little bit about what an Excel MVP is?
So being okay, so there is an MVP contingent for every Microsoft product. Xbox, OneDrive, you know, PowerPoint, all of them. And so we get direct access to the engineers that make the product. Um, that's what I find is the greatest value for me because we get to help guide the future of these products. Uh, we're not employees. We're not salespeople or spokespeople. We can be openly critical of the products. Um, and it takes skill with the product, but what I think is more important is the community contribution. How are you helping? Because a lot of people have the skill, but when we go to the MVP summit or when we participate on MVP calls, are we providing value to the engineers? Are we bringing them like I work with this two-person company and they don't have any need for this feature. Or, you know what, if there was this slight change in this proposed feature, my two-person companies would love this because, and then boom, boom, boom. And they have said to us over and over again, we're here in Redmond. We don't see what's happening out in the field. So your enterprise level needs or the department within an enterprise. Maybe there's something that they're not getting from the enterprise level that they can use Excel for at the department level or at the cubicle level.
Right.
So, sometimes they'll even put together little groups and say, hey, we're thinking about this, but we don't know what's going on out in the field. So, anybody who's interested in participating in helping me develop this graphing or a certain formula, a batch of formulas, email me and let me know you want to be involved. So that's what it means to be an MVP. And we're reevaluated every year and they review what we've done over the past year, what community contributions we've made.
Well, I hope this podcast can count as a contribution.
Yes,
I'm
yes,
very
it will.
interested. Well, I didn't mean for it to be that way, but I'm
Right,
happy to help.
right. Yeah, because it's writing books,
Sure.
doing a podcast, the YouTube channel,
Sure.
speaking at meetups, community contribution.
Absolutely. Well, maybe this is a good part because you talked about that piece, the folks in Redmond aren't out in the field like you are. And I thought maybe this might be a good point to talk about that second component of communication that I am so interested in and how you do your work, which is as a consultant. Because in addition to your work as I guess it's probably uncompensated work as an MVP, I think you make at least part of your living as a consultant. So I
Right.
think, and that's so tricky to navigate those waters because you're working with so many different clients. And some of them are probably a dream to work with, and some of them are probably quite difficult to work with, and everything in between. So, can you talk about just for a few minutes about being a consultant, and maybe for people in the audience who are consultants themselves and maybe thinking about doing that? How do you navigate those waters? How do you kind of shift between different personalities and to be a good communicator across the board?
I struggle to call myself a communicator. Um, I have erred on the side of I need to be in communication.
Mm.
However, I get in communication because I've tried to talking in circles and somebody um doesn't has a bad idea. So Oz, you gotta you're like give them an idea and make it sound like they came up with it.
I've heard that before. Yeah.
I'm not good with that. That
Sure.
seems like something I need to go and practice.
Sure.
And that I'd rather be watching reruns of the Andy Griffith Show than practicing some stuff like that.
Right.
You know, so I have to be in communication. And there are people who can talk better than I can. I know people who are more persuasive. Um, but I've had to tell clients the person you want in charge of this tool doesn't want it. And so now I'm sitting here with this person that doesn't want to work with this tool. I'm, you know, in tension with them. This is my money. I've got bills to pay, and I gotta figure out telling the person who's writing the checks how to tell them this bad news.
Mm.
Or I could say this is not my problem. They'll figure it out. Just give me my money. But no, I feel like that wouldn't have any integrity. And then I'm also thinking, what if they go complaining about me that Oz isn't doing something? Oz is being mean to me.
Well, because as a consultant, your reputation is everything, right? I mean,
Yes,
you don't
yes,
want them
yes,
besmirching your good name. I mean,
right.
yeah.
So I got to think about all of that. And the best thing I felt to do was like get in communication
Mm.
and start out with I struggled to have this conversation with you, but I have to tell you about this.
Interesting.
And maybe communication people would say that's the wrong way to start. I don't know, but it's better than me still sitting at my computer trying to figure out, I don't know what to say. Maybe I shouldn't say anything. I don't know. No, get in communication. That's
Keep that
been how I've
flow,
operated.
keep that communication flowing. Is that kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, I,
Yeah.
yeah, some people like the over communication, which is like just everything. And it's got to be hard as a consultant to kind of gauge where
Yeah.
people are. And you almost have to have a thick skin, I would think, on some level to be able to
On
navigate
some
that.
level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Interesting. Well, yeah, and yeah, that's something I've often thought about as a consultant. Like we've all worked in well, not all of us, but a lot of us have worked in desk jobs, and we think that that sort of skill set, working in a maybe a corporation or a stratified organization, that whatever communication skills we learned there and adopted there will translate into the consulting space. And I just wonder if that's like not the right approach, for as far as from the communication standpoint.
Part of what I'm driven by in whatever I do is there's all kinds of invisible stuff. There are hard things to deal with. And let's say I've got a project to help write a formula. And what if I got a snippy client that's like, Oz, this should be so easy.
Mm,
You know, that managing that gets harder than the actual formula.
mm,
And I'm thinking about, my answer that I just gave around communication. When I hear people talk about communication and they post things on LinkedIn, they often make it sound easier than it actually is.
100%.
It's top 7 ways to communicate bad news. Well, I got to first manage. Can this just go away so I can get on with this and get my money?
Do my actual job.
Right? Yeah.
Stop. Get the
That's got to be number one is
so
how do I manage my emotions and my realities before I get into, you know, maybe send out a nicely worded but concise email to kind of prime the person for this awful news you're going to lay on them. No, I got all kind of other stuff to manage,
right.
you know,
Can we all just
you
be
know,
adults
like,
here? Yeah.
yeah, like, Oz, how do you become a freelancer? Well, you got to be able to deal with, somebody owes you $500 and they were paying, and now 3 weeks has gone by and you haven't heard a word from them.
Mm,
The person who used to reply to your texts, now, oh,
mm. Well,
yeah,
that's wow. That's a
yeah,
kettle of
and maybe
fish.
the Excel part is easy, but now you got to manage that. Where's my $500? And do I stop working until they pay me the $500 so that we can continue moving forward?
Yeah, because you have a
Are they
contract
dead?
probably. Yeah.
Whatever,
Yeah. Wow. Right. Well, and I think what you're saying, yes, it definitely applies to consultants, but I think you can extend it to just so many walks
Yeah,
of life. how do you
yes.
how do you get past that log jam in so many cases? So yeah,
Hmm.
that's probably a subject for a whole other podcast episode. So we'll have to have you come back. And it's so funny because I was going to end the our discussion today with asking you about AI. And I'm just
Hmm.
sitting here thinking like Oz would rather probably deal with AI in some cases than have to deal with personalities and maybe somebody had a bad day and things like that. So
No,
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 oh, interesting.
because
Oh,
I like people. I like integrating with people or interacting with people. I like going to see a new client and meeting new people and servicing them and helping their lives get better.
hmm.
I love that. I love going on road trips and finding old rundown bars where locals hang out
Oh,
and
wow.
sit at the bar and start up conversations. So I'm not anti people. Um, and AI gives me a lot of heartburn because there is so much hype and it's been really difficult to cut through the hype
Oh, wow.
because in in addition to the hype, you got all this money that's being thrown into it. And there's incentive for even more hype
Especially
that now
Microsoft.
somebody, huh?
I was gonna say, sorry, I didn't interrupt you, but Microsoft and Copilot. You're in that Microsoft orbit, so I'm sure it's
Boy,
nonstop for you.
and that whole thing that happened in November, that we were all set, ready for our lives to change in November, and they delivered this flat balloon. I,
Mm.
you know, and I've played with Copilot. I did a presentation in London earlier this
Oh,
year
wow.
where I was showing this thing is great at telling me, sorry, I can't do this. Try a smaller step or try something different. Sorry, I can't do this. Um, and then when it did succeed, it didn't succeed consistently,
Oh, I see. Okay.
even with an example of summing several columns.
Right.
It would sum them differently each time. And it was just frustrating. Um, so I can see potential, and I use ChatGPT a little bit, and for very basic stuff, I am not dancing around in circles with getting a prompt right. No. If
Right.
I have some vague sense of what I need to do, I'm gonna get on with that and not dance around with some prompt. Um, so I am kind of sitting on the sidelines watching this whole AI thing. I'm not getting sucked into the hype of if you're not on this, you're gonna get replaced by somebody who is.
Interesting.
Well, we got people every day opening Excel for the first time. and somehow they get up to speed.
Right.
Somehow.
Right. I've heard it said that like AI right now is an assistive tool for people, but sometimes I feel like maybe people are the assistive tool for AI. It's kind of where we're
I
at.
don't know.
It's like a problem or
Right.
a solution without a problem in some senses, but
Yes.
yeah.
I can agree with that because it seems like a lot of the urgency, a lot of the advice seems to really be use this solution and go search your life for a problem.
Right.
No,
No, who's
I
got the
want to watch
time?
Andy Griffith. I don't
Yeah.
want to be hunting around trying to fool with this
Although,
thing.
although where there are some AI platforms where you can make your own Andy Griffith show, so that's in the offing. But other than that, you
And
just
no,
put
and
in a
then
prompt.
yeah, yeah, and then they're gonna mess around and have Thelma Lou dating Otis.
Oh no,
And then you say,
little Ronnie.
wait a minute, AI did this.
You're like that breaks the canon. We can't have that.
Well,
The
well,
Andy Griffith
if
canon,
some
if there's a such thing,
right,
probably there's some group. Yeah,
it would just be wrong, and people who know would know, and that's an issue with AI. Is you know, I did use it to generate me some VBA code.
mm,
All right, so I got the code and I pasted it into the VBA editor, and I could see the areas where I needed to modify the code to get it to work, and it did work. But I knew that.
that's the
Now,
thing.
somebody sitting around and watch the Andy Griffith show and seeing that Otis is dating Thelma Lou, they
They'll
aren't
just
gonna
take it.
know that's just wrong. Thelma Lou dated Barney Fife.
Everybody knows that. Come on now. I
Well,
don't.
anybody who knows, right? And but let me make this distinction. It's people who know. Because if some random person was sitting on the couch watching Otis, he's going to some still while Thelma Lou has driven him there. Um, they might just be entertained. And then somebody walks into the room, says, "Wait a minute, wait a
What's
minute,
happening here? This isn't right.
yeah, this AI did this."
Turn this off.
Yeah, well, yeah, I downloaded this. I said, "Yeah, that's
Imagine.
not right."
And I think that, yeah, imagine just that, gone exponentially across society. And I think we see the problem.
Yeah,
Wow. Well,
yeah.
I'm so glad. Yeah, actually, I was going to end on that,
Yeah.
but like, I'm so glad we got
Well,
into it a little early because, um, it actually foregrounds the human aspect of what you do. And I talked to you on a previous occasion. We talked a little bit about, you know, and I may be having a thesis in search of evidence, right? I want to, but I don't want to do that. So I want to get your point or your perspective on this. But like, I'm just on a surface level. I see data analysis almost like investigative journalists, because I think people in your line of work have to be, and people who are learning it, like myself, you have to like teach yourself how to ask the right questions. And I think that
yes,
actually, I think that goes right to the heart of what you were just talking about with AI. Is AI just doesn't seem always to know what questions to ask because it just doesn't understand the world the right way. So
right.
I'm interested in this idea, if not necessarily storytelling per se. Do you see yourself maybe as that sort of investigative journalist, and why or why not? Maybe you don't see it that way.
I have described one of my greatest skills as knowing when to go digging, probing, and picking.
Mm.
Because once again, the Excel piece can be really, really easy. But what you just mentioned about AI not being able to ask uh, clarification questions, I learned that the term for that is disambiguation.
Oh, okay.
So that's a lot of what I had to do with clients or within projects when I had a regular job. So much disambiguation. What do you mean? What is biggest? What is furthest? Um, what is the scope of what you need? between which dates, which product
Right.
lines. What are you trying to accomplish? Because what you just described, I can go about in multiple ways and get different results. So now I need to know your motivation. What question are you trying to answer by getting this data? And I feel like that's the job. And in fact, that's what happened in my final interview before I was offered a job as a commissions analyst. We can teach you X, Y, and Z. We can't teach these other things.
It's like teaching you. We can't teach
Having the,
you how to
and
think,
yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. Well, and getting over yourself,
Uh,
right? So I say, hey, go do this, and I need to have these four things. Do you go back and feel uncertain, but also feel like you don't want to communicate that you're a dummy by coming and asking me
well,
questions?
that's communication right there, right?
Right,
You want to make
right,
it like a safe space almost for
right,
people to,
right. Yes.
yeah,
Or, and when it's not a safe space, because I did have a situation where I was digging into something my director told me is not worth dealing with. I felt different. And I went digging some more and I found some explosive stuff. So now I'm sitting in my cubicle thinking, yesterday he told me to leave this alone. And clearly I didn't listen. But he needs to see what I just found. And the first words out of his mouth were, I thought I thought I told you to let this be.
right.
I said, yeah, but this. And his eyes got big and we talked a little bit and he said, this is your number one priority right now because we got to fix this.
Oh, wow.
And yes, there's a communication and me thinking, and do I get into some long winding, no, you told me to let this alone, but I had this instinct. No.
They don't want to
I
hear
go
that.
in there and say, okay, look what I found. We owe this person $5,000. We owe this person $700. And I know you said we came to leave this alone, but this is what we're dealing with.
That sounds like a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
Hmm.
It was a very big deal. And so now we get into like a moral dilemma of what if I did listen and say, this is not my problem. This is not worth pursuing. And 6 months later, somebody else finds out about the problem. Now I have to deal with, why didn't I say something when I knew it? Now we're not dealing with the problem anymore. Now we're dealing with the ignorance of the problem and the problem.
Bigger problems. Yeah. It's just so much
So,
human. I think people think of data analysts or maybe even to an extent data scientists as just sitting at a desk and like just crunching numbers or looking at trend lines or whatever. But there is
mhm,
such a human dynamic to it that is so interesting to me. And it's all communications from I'm sure I'm coming at it with my own bias, but it's so interesting to me about how do you navigate that. So in my experience with data, and like I said, I come at it from a publications writer perspective, journalism, things like that. Whenever I've looked at like data to see, hey, can we have like a data driven sort of a content strategy going forward? So much of it is looking backwards, and data can tell you only so much. It can tell you like, okay, these people are reading this stuff, but it can't actually help you. Maybe in the future it will, but as things stand, it can't help you anticipate, or it can't help you find trends that maybe other people aren't seeing.
right.
You know what I mean? There's so much human judgment that has to go into that. So what you're saying right now, even with your idea of like, I'm looking out into the world and I'm seeing maybe there's a future this way, but not this way. That just resonates so much with me, even from a data perspective, of like there has to be, you have to have like alongside the data piece, you have to have this highly trained sense of the world as well, just to understand how it works and to be able to anticipate it. So
or a curiosity to go
curiosity.
looking. Right. There was one time where the vice president of sales contacted me and said, "How did my worst salesperson from last year have this crazy amount of commissions earned this month?"
Hmm.
And so I had to go dig.
Right.
And um, I put the data in a graph and I saw like a slow sweep up to a peak and a drop, a slow sweep up to a peak and then a drop. And then through all kinds of digging, ah, there is a quarterly national exam for a particular license. And we just this year started selling books to help people prepare for that license. And so that's that explains this wave that we're seeing and why we didn't see it before a certain point. And now we at this point we've got enough data to where I can see the sales are tied to people preparing for that exam.
Voila. You've got it. Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
interesting because you've hit on some big themes here, which is to be, and I always put it in my mind in terms of communication. So to be a good communicator, you have to keep it interesting for yourself first and foremost. You don't want to
Mhm.
get stale, not just for your audience, but for yourself. And you have to have an intense curiosity, I think. To
Yes.
really be able to get to the fine grain, the truth. I think you're always trying to get to
You
some kind
got
of
to.
ground truth. And so,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, you got to. I talked with a guy who said that he has a team of really great analysts, but they are not curious,
that seems contradictory,
and
but
it
okay.
bothers him. Well, because there is one thing of like, you know, the vice president of sales in that previous example, he could have just said the numbers are what the numbers are and just pay the commissions. Not a big deal. But this was messing with how he had budgeted the next year. And this was like shocking him. But he didn't know where to start to figure out what is going on, and it didn't hit him until that one bad salesperson suddenly hit these spectacular numbers. Well, she had a lot of the right accounts, and then the whole thing I explained about the cyclical nature of this exam. The example this guy gave was that he suspected that these people who would file bankruptcy, that there must be a pattern to how they pay their bills right before they file bankruptcy.
Hmm.
And his analysts weren't at all curious about looking for this.
Oh, wow.
They would show up and they would do what they were there to do. And nobody was saying, hey, wait a second. And that gets back to that interview I described, as a commissions analyst.
Right.
We can't teach you to say, hey, wait a minute. We can't teach you the urgency of that. And this is where it is critical to give a damn about other people because we are in a society. We've got neighbors and families and stuff, people we care about. And when we have data, I don't feel it's being a good citizen to just say, here's the data. And yeah, all of a sudden, your commissions are wrong, or you're sitting somewhere waiting for something that's not coming because the inventory on the website wasn't accurate. no, that's we got to care about each
Got
other.
to take it that next
And
step.
yes, and say something funny is going on. Let me look into this. And sometimes find out there is nothing funny going on. There's just something weird that happened. It happened and we just have to accept it. But at least you dug to go find out that no, nothing fishy was going on. And when you go and that's another thing is I haven't had to do any like presentations. My position has usually been, hey Oz, how can we trust these numbers? How do we know we can trust these numbers? This looks funny. What's going on? I have to be able to say, I am aware of that funny looking number and I have dug into it and found that several things just happened at one time and we got this anomaly. Or I discovered the cyclical nature of a national exam and we can expect this going forward.
It's almost
We
like
got to dig
you got to
and
get in their
yeah,
head. You got to get in the head of the
yeah,
person you're talking to and anticipate their
yeah.
questions almost like any good
Anticipate their
lawyer.
questions.
So you're like a
Yeah,
lawyer mixed with an investigative journalist mixed with a psychologist. It's not, besides that, it's an easy job. Come on.
yeah. I loved it. I loved it.
Wow.
I didn't like having to go to a regular job every day, but I loved the digging. I loved being uh, responsible for this kind of stuff. I loved being the hero for a lot of people who will never know what I did for them.
If anybody would like to get in contact with you and talk more about your very important work, where would you have them go as a first step?
Oh, LinkedIn.
Okay.
You can find me on LinkedIn, Oz du Soleil, and you can follow me on my YouTube channel. And I do have an Instagram account, but on Instagram, I'm doing mostly kaleidoscopes lately. I collect kaleidoscopes. I've got about 200 of them.
Yeah, and you were kind enough to
And
show some of them to me last time we talked. So
yeah,
anyone who
yeah,
reaches out to Oz, definitely ask him about the kaleidoscopes. It's very interesting, very interesting. Past hobby,
yeah.
I guess it's a hobby. But well, thank you so much, Oz, and we'll definitely have you back if you'd be so kind as to come back and update us on the state of things in the world of Excel.
Yes, definitely. And I really enjoyed this.
Uh,
Because, when the topic of Excel comes up, we can do tips and tricks. But what does it take to be really good at the job? It's all of this kind of stuff. Because, yeah, you can watch an XLOOKUP tutorial, but can you deal with some, some family-owned business and they're all bickering with each other and half of them don't want me there and half do. Yeah,
So we'll add marriage counselor to that job description. Psychologist, marriage counselor, journalist. Yeah, it's all in there. All
yeah.
right. Well, thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Well,
We'll
thanks
definitely
for
have you back.
yes.
Yes, it's such a
All
pleasure
right.
talking to you. Have a great day.